7 years ago, my sister told our parents I had dropped out of medical school. She said I couldn't handle the pressure, that I had quit quietly and was too ashamed to admit it. By the end of that night, I wasn't just the family disappointment, I was no longer welcome in my own home. My parents didn't come to my residency graduation. They didn't attend my wedding. They returned my letters unopened. For 7 years, I built a life without them. Then, last month, my sister was rushed into the emergency room after a serious accident. The trauma team called for the attending surgeon. When the double doors opened and my mother read the name stitched across the white coat walking toward her daughter's bed, she grabbed my father's arm so hard it left bruises. Because the doctor standing there wasn't a stranger. It was me. My name is Sofia Carter, and this is how a lie cost me 7 years and how the truth finally walked back into the room. The night I stopped being a daughter didn't begin with shouting. It began with silence. We were sitting around the kitchen table in our house in Cleveland, Ohio. My father, Mark Carter, had just finished dinner. My mother, Linda, was rinsing dishes at the sink. My older sister, Emily, stood near the counter, arms folded tightly across her chest like she was bracing for impact. "I think you should tell them," she said, looking at me. "Tell them what?" I asked. Her expression didn't change. "About school." My stomach tightened. "There's nothing to tell." Emily turned to our parents. Sophia dropped out. The words hit the table like a glass shattering. "That's not true," I said immediately. My father's chair scraped against the floor as he sat up straighter. "What is she talking about?" She withdrew. Emily continued calmly. "She told me weeks ago. She said she couldn't keep up, that she was done." I stared at her. I said I was exhausted. I said second year was hard. That's not the same thing. Emily unlocked her phone and slid it across the table. "Then explain these." On the screen were text messages, mine but cut short, cropped, rearranged. "I can't do this anymore. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. I just need it to stop." My voice felt trapped in my chest. Those were taken out of context. I was venting. Everyone vents. My mother turned slowly toward me. "Did you withdraw from your program?" "I filed for a temporary academic leave," I said carefully. "1 semester. It's approved. I'm going back in January." "That's not what you told me," Emily replied smoothly. "You know, that's not what I meant." My father's eyes hardened. "Why would your sister lie about something like this?" I looked at Emily. She didn't look away. "I don't know," I said quietly. But I did know. Emily had always been the golden one. Confident, social, the daughter who filled rooms with laughter. I was the quiet one with textbooks stacked higher than my social life. For years, that difference didn't matter. Until I got into medical school. Until relatives started saying things like, "Dr. Sofia Carter has a nice ring to it." Until I saw something shift behind Emily's smile. "You embarrass this family," my father said, his voice low and final. "If you're not in medical school, then what exactly are you doing with your life?" "I am in medical school." "Then prove it. I can show you paperwork." "I don't want paperwork," he snapped. "I want honesty." I felt something inside me fracture. "I am being honest." My mother whispered. "Why didn't you come to us if you were struggling?" "I tried," I said. "You were busy." Emily said she'd explain it better. Emily let out a soft, humorless laugh. "Don't drag me into your choices." That was when I understood. She wasn't confused. She was deliberate. My father stood. "If you withdrew and you're lying about it, you're not staying here pretending everything is fine. You're kicking me out?" My voice trembled. "Until you decide to tell the truth." The truth. I packed a suitcase that night while my parents stayed in their bedroom. Emily leaned against the hallway wall, watching me zip it closed. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered. "Yes, I did," she replied. "Why?" Her face softened for half a second, not with guilt, but with something colder. "You were never supposed to outshine me." The front door closed behind me at 11:47 p.m. The porch light turned off, and just like that, I stopped being someone's daughter. I drove back to Chicago that night with my suitcase in the passenger seat and my phone lighting up with notifications I was too afraid to open. Not from my parents. From classmates asking if I was coming back next semester. From my academic advisor reminding me to finalize my leave paperwork. Because that was the truth. I hadn't dropped out. I had filed for a 1-semester academic leave after nearly collapsing from exhaustion during finals week. Second year of medical school is brutal. I was sleeping 3 hours a night. I was living on coffee and fear. Dr. Michael Hayes, the Dean of Student Affairs, had looked at me kindly when I sat in his office weeks earlier. "Burnout isn't failure, Sophia," he'd said. "It's a warning sign. You're one of our strongest students. Take the semester, regroup, come back ready." That conversation was documented, signed, official, yet somehow, it hadn't mattered. The next morning, I walked straight into Dr. Hayes's office. "I need printed confirmation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything. Leave status, re-enrollment approval, dates." He frowned. "Is there a problem? My family thinks I dropped out." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to call them?" I imagined my father's reaction. The defensiveness, the pride, the way he'd already decided. "It wouldn't change anything," I said softly. Dr. Hayes handed me a folder. "For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing by taking care of yourself." I nodded, but it didn't feel like I was taking care of myself. It felt like I was defending myself in a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. That afternoon, I sent my parents an email. Subject line: "Proof of enrollment." I attached every document. I wrote carefully. I did not withdraw. I took an approved academic leave. "I will resume classes in January. I love you. Please call me." I hit send. I waited. Nothing. I called that night. Straight to voicemail. The next morning, I tried again. Blocked. I stared at the screen for a long time before understanding what that meant. My own parents had blocked my number. I sent a text to Emily. "Why are you doing this?" Her reply came minutes later. "You made your choice." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just finality. A week later, I mailed a letter to Cleveland. Handwritten. 3 pages. I explained everything again: the leave, the stress, the paperwork. I told them I was coming back to finish what I started. I told them I missed them. 5 days later, the envelope came back. Unopened. Return to sender stamped across the front in my mother's handwriting. I sat on the floor of my apartment and held that envelope in my hands for an hour. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the realization that you are arguing with silence. January came. I returned to classes. No one at school knew what had happened. On campus, I was still Sofia Carter, top of her class, focused, reliable. At home, I was a ghost. When my birthday passed, there was no call. When I matched into residency at St. Mary's Medical Center in Columbus, I sent one more email. "I start surgical residency in July. I wish you could be there." No response. During graduation, I scanned the auditorium anyway. Rows of proud parents holding flowers. Empty seat in mine. I told myself I didn't care. But later that night, alone in my apartment with my diploma on the kitchen counter, I let myself cry. Not because they weren't there, but because they believed I had chosen to leave them. That hurt more than being thrown out. It meant they thought I had abandoned them first. And for 7 years, that false story lived comfortably in their house while I built my life somewhere else. The silence stretched. 1 Thanksgiving turned into 3. 3 turned into 7. And with every year, it became harder to imagine walking back through that door. Until the night the hospital pager went off and fate decided we were done pretending. Residency doesn't leave much room for heartbreak. That's what I told myself during my first year at St. Mary's Medical Center in Columbus. When you're standing under fluorescent lights at 2 in the morning, trying to steady your hands while a team waits for your call, you don't get to think about empty chairs at graduations. You think about anatomy. You think about timing. You think about staying calm. And I was good at staying calm. "Carter, you don't rattle," my supervising attending once told me. That's rare. If only he knew how much practice I'd had. The first year nearly broke me physically. The second year strengthened me. By the third, I understood something important. Pain doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It just gets organized into compartments. Family went into one box. Medicine went into another. I opened only one at a time. I met Daniel Brooks during my 3rd year. He was a public defender who volunteered legal services for patients navigating hospital billing disputes. The first time we spoke, I was running on 2 hours of sleep and a granola bar. "You look like you haven't blinked in days," he said gently. "I blink," I replied. "Just strategically." He laughed, not at me, but with me. It felt unfamiliar. We started getting coffee after late shifts. Then dinners. Then long walks where he'd ask questions I wasn't sure how to answer. "Do you ever talk to your family?" he asked one night. "No." "By choice?" I hesitated. "By design." He didn't push. That was what made me trust him. Daniel didn't try to fix things. He didn't tell me to forgive. He didn't suggest I was partly responsible. He simply said, "You didn't deserve to be cut off without proof." It was the first time anyone had said it that plainly. When he proposed, it wasn't dramatic. We were sitting on a park bench overlooking the Scioto River. He held my hand and said, "I don't need a perfect past. I just want a future with you." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I mailed my parents a wedding invitation. Cream cardstock, gold lettering. I included a short handwritten note. "I would love for you to be there." 3 weeks later, the envelope came back, unopened. Daniel found me at the kitchen table staring at it. "You don't have to keep trying," he said softly. "I know. But I kept it anyway." In a drawer. Proof that I had reached out. Proof that I hadn't been the one to close the door. The wedding was small. 30 guests. A backyard ceremony at Daniel's parents' home. His mother walked me down the aisle. I smiled through the entire thing, and I meant it. But when I caught sight of the empty space where my parents should have been, something inside me went quiet. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just quiet. Afterward, Daniel held me close and whispered, "You built this yourself." He was right. Every shift, every exam, every sleepless night, every moment, I doubted myself but kept going. I became Dr. Sofia Carter not because my family believed in me but because I refused to stop believing in myself. 7 years passed, 7 birthdays, 7 holiday seasons where my phone never lit up with their names. Sometimes I wondered what story Emily was still telling. Did they picture me lost somewhere? Did they imagine I'd given up? Or did they just prefer not to question it? Daniel once asked, "If they ever found out the truth, what would you do?" I thought about that longer than I expected. "I wouldn't chase revenge," I said finally. "I'd want accountability." "And forgiveness?" "That depends. On effort. On consistency. On whether they were willing to admit they never checked." By year 7, I was an attending emergency surgeon. I had my own team, my own office, my name on a door. I worked hard. I built credibility. I trained residents who trusted my judgment. The narrative Emily had written about me had no power here, and I told myself that was enough. Until one January night at 3:12 a.m., my pager went off. Level 1 trauma. Female. Unstable. I grabbed the intake tablet and saw a name I hadn't spoken out loud in years. Emily Carter. Everything I had compartmentalized for 7 years threatened to collide in one fluorescent hallway. And for the first time since leaving Cleveland, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Not grief, not anger, but inevitability. The truth had finally found its way back into my life. And this time, it was lying on a hospital stretcher. The emergency department has a rhythm at 3 in the morning. It's not chaos, it's precision disguised as urgency. Monitors hum. Nurses move quickly but deliberately. Instructions are short, controlled. No one panics because panic wastes time. I stepped into Trauma Bay 2 and reached for the intake tablet. Patient name, Emily Carter. Age, 34. Mechanism of injury, motor vehicle collision. Status, unstable. Emergency contact, Mark Carter, father. For a moment, the sounds around me dulled. Janet, my charge nurse, noticed the pause. "Dr. Carter?" I blinked. "I'm fine," I said automatically. But hospital protocol doesn't care about pride or history. I stepped into the hallway and pulled out my phone. "Dr. Patel," I said when he answered. "I have a conflict of interest. The incoming patient is my sister. I'm disclosing it now. I'll take the lead unless you determine my judgment is compromised." There was a brief silence. "Understood," he replied calmly. "I'll observe." By the time I re-entered the trauma bay, the ambulance doors were already opening. The stretcher rolled in fast, and there she was, Emily. Her face pale, hair matted against her forehead, monitors attached, oxygen mask in place. I didn't allow myself to process her as my sister. She was a patient, vitals unstable, internal injury suspected, immediate intervention required. "BP?" I asked, dropping. "Prep for OR." The doors burst open again. My parents rushed in behind the paramedics. "That's my daughter," my father shouted, trying to follow the stretcher. Janet stepped between them. "Sir, you need to wait in the family area. I want the attending physician," he demanded. Janet glanced instinctively toward me, and that's when my mother saw it. She followed Janet's gaze and read the navy stitching across my chest. Dr. Sofia Carter, MD. Her hand flew to my father's arm. She grabbed it so tightly he winced. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." I walked toward them, pulling off my gloves. "I'm the attending surgeon," I said evenly. My father stared at me like he was trying to reconcile two versions of reality. You're the doctor?" "Yes," but Emily said. I know what Emily said. For a split second, I saw something crack in his expression. Confusion, doubt, fear. "Is she going to be okay?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. "I'm taking her into surgery now," I replied. "I will update you when I have more information." They stood frozen as the double doors closed between us. 7 years of silence separated by a sheet of reinforced glass. Inside the operating room, I scrubbed in. My hands were steady. They had to be. Dr. Patel stood across from me, quiet but present. "You're clear to proceed," he said. I nodded. The surgery demanded focus. Not history. Not resentment. Not unfinished conversations. Clamp. Suction. Vitals. Time compressed into action. For 3 hours and 22 minutes, I operated with the same precision I would have given any patient. Because professionalism is not conditional. Because the oath matters. Because even when trust is broken, duty remains. When we finished, her vitals stabilized. "She's going to recover," Dr. Patel said quietly. I stepped away from the table. My gloves came off slowly. And for the first time that night, my hands trembled. Not from doubt. From release. I had done my job. Now I had to face the part no training prepares you for. Family. The waiting room was almost empty except for my parents. My mother was pacing. My father stood rigid, staring at the floor. When I entered, they both stood immediately. "How is she?" my mother asked. "She's stable," I said. The surgery was successful. Relief flooded her face. My father didn't speak right away. He was staring at my badge again. "You're really an attending," he said quietly. "Yes." "You never dropped out?" "No." My mother covered her mouth. I know what you thought. We never got your emails," she said. "I sent documentation. We were told you stopped contacting us." I was blocked. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. My father sank into a chair. "She said you were ashamed, that you didn't want to face us." I was exhausted, I replied evenly. Not ashamed. For 7 years, they had believed a story because it required less confrontation, because it preserved the image of the daughter who stayed. Now, that story was unraveling in a hospital waiting room under fluorescent lights, and there was nowhere left for it to hide. Behind me, monitors continued their steady rhythm, life moving forward. Truth, finally unavoidable, but the hardest conversation was still waiting. Because the next time I walked into that room, Emily would be awake, and she would have to look at me not as the sister she erased, but as the doctor who saved her. Emily woke up the next afternoon. The ICU was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors and the low murmur of nurses charting outside the glass doors. Light filtered in through half-drawn blinds, pale and unforgiving. I paused before entering. For 7 years, I had imagined confronting her in dozens of ways at a family dinner, at a courthouse, at a therapy office. Never like this. Never with her in a hospital bed, and me in a white coat. I stepped inside. Her eyes were open, unfocused at first. Then they shifted toward me. Confusion, recognition, shock. "You," she whispered. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm your attending surgeon." She stared at the badge again, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something less threatening. "You're actually a doctor." "I always was." The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. She swallowed. "How bad was it?" "You had significant internal injuries," I said evenly. "The surgery went well. You'll recover." There was a pause. Then she asked the question that told me everything. "Did Mom and Dad see you?" "Yes." Her eyes closed briefly. And when they opened again, something in them had shifted. Not arrogance. Not calculation. Fear. You told them? She asked. I told them I never left school. Her breathing hitched. I didn't think you'd make it, she said. To what? To this. I stepped closer to the bed. You didn't think I'd finish. Silence. You tried to stop me. I continued quietly. Her jaw tightened. I called your dean once, she admitted. The room seemed to narrow. What did you tell him? That you fabricated your leave paperwork. The honesty stunned me more than denial would have. And when that didn't work? I asked. She looked away. I told them you were ashamed, that you didn't want us anymore. I exhaled slowly. For 7 years I had questioned myself. Wondered if I could have done more, called more, explained better. And all along, she had reinforced the lie. Why? That was the question that mattered. Why, Emily? I asked. She blinked hard, fighting tears. Because you were supposed to be the quiet one. The sentence hung there. You were supposed to be the one who stayed small, she continued, voice trembling now. You were never supposed to outgrow the story we had. What story? That I was the accomplished one. There it was. Not rage. Not hatred. Comparison. Insecurity sharpened into sabotage. I worked for everything I have, I said softly. I know, she whispered. That's what made it worse. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The monitors filled the silence. You cost me 7 years, I said. She nodded, tears slipping down toward her ears. I know. You cost Mom and Dad 7 years too. Her breath caught. I didn't think it would go that far. That's the thing about lies, I said steadily. They rarely stop where you intend. Footsteps approached outside the glass doors. Our parents were standing there, watching, waiting. Emily saw them too. They're going to hate me, she whispered. I looked at her carefully. They're going to be disappointed, I corrected. There's a difference. She let out a shaky breath. What do you want from me? Accountability. Not apology. Not tears. Accountability. You're going to tell them the truth, I said. I will. In writing. She hesitated, then nodded. To every relative you told, every family friend, every person who believed I gave up. Her eyes widened slightly. That's humiliating. So was being erased. The words were calm, measured. Not revenge. Balance. I don't want to destroy you, I continued. I want the record corrected. Her shoulders sagged. I'll do it. I studied her face for signs of performance, for the old flicker of manipulation. But what I saw instead was something unfamiliar. Defeat. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just quiet realization. You saved me, she said finally. Yes. Why? I didn't hesitate. Because I'm a doctor. And because, no matter what she had done, I refused to let bitterness define me. She began to cry, then not loudly, not theatrically, just softly. I'm sorry, she said. I held up a hand. Sorry is a beginning, not a resolution. Her gaze lifted to meet mine. You don't get to step back into my life because of this, I added. If reconciliation happens, it will be structured, transparent, with therapy, with boundaries. She nodded slowly. You're not the same, she whispered. No, I agreed. I'm not. I stepped toward the door. Behind the glass, my parents straightened when they saw me move. Before I left, Emily spoke again. Sophia? I paused. I was scared, she admitted. Every time someone mentioned you, I felt like I was shrinking. I considered that. You should have grown, I said gently, not pulled me down. I walked out of the ICU and into the hallway where my parents waited. My mother's eyes searched my face. Did she tell you? She asked. Yes. My father swallowed hard. And? She's going to tell you the truth. He nodded once. For the first time in 7 years, I saw something in his posture that hadn't been there before. Uncertainty. The narrative he had defended had fractured, and there was no one left to blame but the choices made in silence. As I headed down the corridor, Daniel appeared at the far end, having just arrived from home. He crossed the distance quickly. You okay? He asked quietly. I let out a long breath. Yes, I said. And for the first time since that night in Cleveland, it was true. Because the truth was no longer buried. It was standing in the open. And this time, I wasn't the one being judged. I was the one holding the ground. Emily was discharged 12 days later. Physically stable, medically cleared, emotionally exposed. I didn't visit her room the morning she left. That wasn't avoidance, it was boundaries. My responsibility as her physician had ended. Whatever came next belonged to us as sisters, not doctor and patient. 2 nights after she went home, I received an email notification at 8:47 p.m. Subject line: "To our family, an important correction." It was from Emily. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, quiet, giving me space. The email was 3 paragraphs. No embellishments. No excuses. She admitted she had manipulated text messages. She admitted she told our parents I withdrew from medical school when I had not. She admitted she had discouraged them from contacting me. She admitted she attempted to interfere with my academic standing out of jealousy. And then the sentence that mattered most: "Sofia did not abandon this family." I created the narrative that she did. My chest tightened. 7 years condensed into one line. Replies began within minutes. Aunt Carol wrote, "I don't know what to say." Cousin Matt, "This is hard to read, but thank you for telling the truth." Our grandmother simply replied, "Call me." My parents didn't respond in the thread. Instead, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but I did. My mother's voice was trembling. "We read it." "I know." There was a long pause. "I don't know how we let this happen," she whispered. "You didn't verify," I said gently. "You trusted the version that felt easier." My father took the phone next. His voice was different, quieter than I had ever heard it. "I owe you an apology." "Yes," I said calmly. "You do." Another pause. "We should have checked." "Yes." "I should have called your school." "Yes." I chose not to because I didn't want to believe I might have been wrong. That admission landed heavier than anything else he'd said. "I'm not asking you to forget this," he continued. "I'm asking for a chance to rebuild." Rebuild. The word felt fragile. "You don't rebuild with apologies," I said evenly. "You rebuild with action." "What does that look like?" "Family counseling," I replied immediately. "Neutral third party, transparency. No more silence." There was hesitation. "We don't usually," he began. "That's exactly the problem." Silence again. Then, finally, "Okay." The first therapy session was awkward. We sat in a softly lit office in Westerville, across from a calm woman named Dr. Karen Whitman. She didn't waste time. "To move forward," she said, "we need to understand why a claim this serious was accepted without verification." My father shifted in his seat. Emily looked down at her hands. My mother wiped her eyes. "Because I believed Emily wouldn't lie," my father said. "And you believed Sofia would?" Dr. Whitman asked gently. The room went very still. "I believed she might fail," he admitted quietly. The words stung more than the original accusation. "Failure," Dr. Whitman said, "is not the same as dishonesty." No one argued. For once, the truth wasn't being negotiated. Emily began individual therapy separately. She texted me one evening after her second session. I didn't realize how much of my identity depended on being the successful one. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I asked myself something harder. What did my identity depend on? Achievement? Validation? Control? Healing doesn't only expose the person who lied. It exposes everyone who allowed it. A week later, I met Emily at a small coffee shop halfway between Columbus and Cleveland. Neutral ground. Public space. Daniel came but sat at a different table, working on his laptop. Emily looked thinner, quieter. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said immediately. "That's good," I replied, "because forgiveness isn't automatic." She nodded. "I was terrified of being average," she admitted. "When people started praising you, I felt invisible." I studied her carefully. "You weren't invisible," I said. "You just weren't the only one shining." She looked down. I didn't know how to share it. "That's something you learn," I said evenly, "not something you sabotage." There were no raised voices, no dramatic tears, just honesty. "I don't hate you," I added. Her eyes lifted in surprise. I was hurt. "There's a difference." She exhaled slowly. "Is there a path back?" "There's a path forward," I corrected. "Back implies we return to what we were. That's not happening. What does forward look like?" "Consistency," I said. "Respect. No rewriting history." "Ever." She nodded again. For the first time, I believed she understood the weight of that promise. Later that night, Daniel and I sat on the couch. "Do you trust them?" he asked. "Not yet," I answered honestly. But I see effort. And effort is measurable, unlike promises. 7 years ago, I left my parents' house with a suitcase and a fractured sense of belonging. Now, I was sitting in my own living room, defining the terms of reconciliation. That shift wasn't accidental. It was earned. The truth had surfaced. Accountability had begun. But forgiveness, if it came at all, would come slowly. Not as a reward. As a result. And this time, I wasn't afraid of silence. Because silence no longer meant erasure. It meant reflection. And reflection is where real repair begins. Rebuilding a relationship is slower than breaking one. Breaking takes a moment. Repair takes repetition. 3 months after the email, my parents began driving down to Columbus every other Sunday. No grand gestures. No dramatic apologies. Just small things. My mother bringing homemade banana bread. My father asking where we kept the extra chairs. Daniel making coffee while pretending not to observe the tension in the room. The first visit was stiff. My father stood in our kitchen like a guest at a stranger's house. "This is nice," he said, glancing at the framed degrees on the wall. "It's home," I replied. He nodded, absorbing the implication. He had never seen my home before. Never asked. That silence was its own kind of absence. Therapy sessions continued. In one session, Dr. Whitman asked a question that shifted everything. "Mark," she said to my father, "when Sofia sent documentation, why didn't you investigate further?" He hesitated. "Because if she was telling the truth," he said slowly, "then I would have been wrong. And I don't handle being wrong well." There it was. Pride. Not cruelty. Not hatred. Pride. "I thought I was protecting the family," he continued. "I thought conflict would make things worse." "And silence made them better?" Dr. Whitman asked gently. He didn't answer. My mother reached for his hand. "I should have pushed harder," she said quietly. "I chose peace over fairness." That sentence stayed with me long after the session ended. Peace over fairness. It sounded harmless. It wasn't. When fairness is sacrificed for comfort, someone pays the price. For 7 years, that someone had been me. Emily's progress was less linear. Some days she sounded grounded. Other days, defensive. One afternoon, she called unexpectedly. "I ran into Mrs. Thompson at the grocery store," she said. "She asked how you were doing." "And?" "I told her you're an attending surgeon." There was hesitation in her voice, like she expected resistance. "That's accurate," I replied calmly. "I didn't minimize it," she added. "I'm glad." Silence stretched between us. "I'm trying," she said. "I know." And I did. Because trying looks different than performing. Trying is uncomfortable. Trying requires admitting you were the architect of damage. Emily had begun doing that, not loudly, not theatrically, but consistently. That mattered. One evening, Daniel found me staring at an old photograph. It was from high school. Emily and I standing side by side at a science fair. She had won a marketing competition. I had won a biology award. We were both smiling. "When did it shift?" Daniel asked softly. "When we stopped celebrating each other," I replied. Comparison had crept in quietly. There was no dramatic rivalry. No shouting. Just small moments of envy left unchecked. Envy unaddressed becomes resentment. Resentment, if fed, becomes narrative. And narrative shapes memory. Emily hadn't just lied. She had rewritten a story to protect her own insecurities. My parents hadn't just believed her. They had chosen the version that required less confrontation. Repair meant all of us examining our roles. Not to distribute blame evenly, but to understand the system that allowed it. 4 months after the surgery, my father asked to speak with me alone. We sat on our back porch, late afternoon sun filtering through bare branches. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "What's that?" "You sent proof." "More than once." "Yes." "I never opened it." "I know." He swallowed hard. "I think I was afraid that if I saw evidence, I'd have to confront Emily. And I didn't want to risk losing both daughters." I looked at him carefully. "You lost one anyway." The words weren't cruel. They were factual. He nodded slowly. "I understand that now." He cleared his throat. "I'm proud of you." 7 years ago, I would have waited for that sentence like oxygen. Now, it felt different. Not necessary, but appreciated. "Thank you," I said. And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was begging for recognition. It felt like an equal exchange. Emily and I met again in early spring. The air was warmer, the tension less sharp. "I've been journaling," she said awkwardly. "That's good." I realized something. I waited. I thought success was limited, like there was only so much of it in a family. If you had more, I had less. "That's not how it works," I said gently. "I know that now." We sat quietly for a moment. "I don't expect us to be what we were," she said. "We won't be," I replied. "But we can be something healthier." She nodded. "I'd like that." So would I. But carefully. Healing isn't dramatic. It's disciplined. It's showing up even when it's inconvenient. It's resisting the urge to rewrite discomfort into something easier. 7 years ago, a lie fractured our family. Now, honesty repeated. Sometimes awkward, sometimes painful. Honesty was slowly stitching it back together. Not into what it was. Into something stronger. Because this time, there were boundaries. This time, there was documentation. This time, no one was allowed to control the narrative alone. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being overshadowed. Because I understood something Emily had finally begun to learn too. Light doesn't diminish when it's shared. It multiplies. 7 months after the surgery, my parents came to our house for brunch. Not because of a crisis. Not because of guilt. Just because it was Sunday. Snow dusted the lawn outside our windows, thin and harmless. Daniel was flipping pancakes in the kitchen, humming off-key to something on the radio. The house smelled like coffee and maple syrup. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:02 a.m. My father hates being late. I opened the door. My mother stood there holding a glass container of fruit salad like it was a peace offering. My father carried a small bag of bagels, awkwardly, as if unsure whether he was overstepping. "Hi, Soph," my mom said softly. "Hi, Soph." She hadn't called me that in years. "Come in," I replied. They stepped inside carefully, like the floor might reject them. Daniel appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Mark, Linda, good to see you." My father nodded. "Daniel." There was still stiffness in his posture, but it wasn't defensive anymore. It was humble. I watched him glance around the living room. The framed photos, the bookshelf, my medical certificates hanging neatly by the hallway. He paused at one picture on the wall. It was from the hospital's annual gala last spring. I stood on stage, accepting an award. Daniel sat in the audience, smiling up at me. "You didn't tell us about this," my father said quietly. "I didn't know how," I answered honestly. He nodded, absorbing that. "Fair." We sat down at the table. 4 plates, 4 forks, 4 glasses. It looked simple. But for 7 years, that table had only held 2 settings on holidays. 2 in Cleveland, 2 in Columbus. Now there were 4 in one place. My mother reached for my hand as Daniel passed the syrup. "I still don't understand how I let it go that long," she said softly. "You wanted to believe your daughter," I replied. "I have 2 daughters," she said, voice trembling slightly. I forgot that. That admission held more weight than any apology she'd given before. Across the table, Emily's name wasn't spoken. Not because we were avoiding her, but because this moment was about something else. Ownership. My father cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about something," Dr. Whitman said. I raised an eyebrow. "That's new." He almost smiled. "She said leadership in a family isn't about control, it's about verification and accountability." I leaned back slightly. And I didn't verify. I assumed. And when Sofia tried to defend herself, I chose silence instead of investigation. Hearing him say my name, not as accusation, not as disappointment but as acknowledgement, shifted something inside me. "I can't undo 7 years," he continued, "but I can commit to never making that mistake again." That was the difference. Not emotion. Commitment. Repair isn't dramatic. It's contractual. It's repeated. It's measurable. After brunch, my father asked if he could help with the dishes. I pointed him toward the cabinet where we kept the plates. He opened it, hesitated, then looked at me. "Where do these go?" I smiled slightly. "Top shelf." He placed them carefully, like they mattered. Because they did. Every small action mattered. Every quiet correction. Every uncomfortable conversation we didn't avoid. That afternoon, after they left, Daniel and I sat on the couch. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about it. Not euphoric. Not magically healed. Grounded. They're trying, I said. And you? I'm allowing it. That was the part people don't talk about. Forgiveness isn't passive. It's active consent to reopen something you once sealed. And I wasn't reopening it blindly. I had boundaries now. If communication stopped again, I would address it immediately. If narrative twisting began, I would confront it. If accountability slipped, I would pull back. Not out of anger, out of protection. Because boundaries are not punishment, they're architecture. A week later, Emily called. I'm thinking about applying for a certification program, she said. Something I've wanted to do for years. That's great, I replied. I used to think there wasn't space for both of us to succeed, she admitted. There is, I said. There always was. There was a pause. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not destroying me when you could have. I considered that. I didn't save you to gain leverage, I said. I saved you because that's who I am. And that was the final truth. I didn't need revenge. I needed integrity. 7 years ago, I left my parents' house feeling erased. Today, I sit in my own home, choosing who enters it. That's not control. That's growth. If you've ever been cut off because someone else controlled the narrative, remember this. Document everything. Protect your reputation legally if needed. Seek mediation when appropriate. Don't surrender your truth to preserve someone else's comfort. Truth doesn't expire. It waits until you're strong enough to stand in it. I am Dr. Sofia Carter. I was once the daughter who was asked to leave. Now, I am the woman who decides when the door opens. And this time, it opens because I choose to let it.